So I'm here to talk about HeroTech 8. Basically, there's a lot. I've got a 25-minute slot, so I figured the best thing to do was try and break HeroTech 8 down into sort of 3 chunks, easily digestible, focuses on data, despite being a drone company. Sort of give you an overview of how the company is structured, a little bit about the history, and then kind of what we're doing. And then what I love is quick fire questions. Chuck them at me. It'd be much easier to do this as a conversation as opposed to like a wait until the end and then I have to remember what I said. So I'll just quickly start with a hopefully a short video. I've hopefully just picked the right one. But this is a video of sort of the tech that we have in action. And oh my God, I've realized that the stream is streaming very poorly, and I've got a video here. I'm going to just give it a second and see if that changes. It's changing on my computer, but it's not changing up here. Oh. So yeah, that's HeroTech 8. In a nutshell, HeroTech 8 is an automated drone station manufacturer. That's what we've been doing for the last 3 years. And this is a video of how it's being used. So an automated drone station is a drone in a box. You take a third-party drone, we put it into a box, and the box has our guidance, navigation, and control tech, our power charging tech, and most importantly, our communication tech. And what this allows us to do is it can take this drone, we can put it anywhere in the world with an internet connection, and then someone somewhere else in the world can fly it. That was the original overarching ambition for the company. So I guess it's kind of like, if anybody has a Roomba, it's kind of like the box charging the Roomba. And that's kind of, on a constant basis, you've got drone services, just like the Roomba is constantly cleaning your house. The idea is that it is as automated as possible because you have got a piece of tech that's, for example, potentially flying around a nuclear power plant. And that nuclear power plant is obviously a piece of critical infrastructure that you need, has to be very, very safe. But you cannot just fly things over the internet and not expect things like latency to go wrong. So we have to leverage as much automation as possible into the technology. Now we spent maybe 3 years building this as quickly as possible. We were funded out of DSTL, so Defense Science Technology. Very, very, it's a group of very, very, researchy guys. We started with three guys out of the mil-spec space and construction, and then we came out into other use cases using automation. And we built the first generation in 2020. The idea was that this drone in a box, everyone was flying drones. If you looked at the investment picture, everyone was either building new drones, or they were building new data platforms, but not the infrastructure to sort of run services constantly. Everyone was focused on those 2 platforms, and we saw a gap. So we spent a lot of time building this, and we wanted it to be readily accessible and quite low cost. Otherwise, customers simply wouldn't buy them. So the first task was to build automation around the takeoff and landing. So you cannot put. It's very, very clear to us, by one of the world's biggest security companies, if it misses its landing back in the box, what happens? And so I said, well, you probably need to send a guy to go and pick it up and then put it back in the box, which is obviously not going to work out, especially with most of the use cases happening in very, very remote areas. Things like north of Scotland. We've had lots of systems go over to the coast in Southeast Asia along the border, and obviously, they're not gonna do that. So it really had to land very, very accurately. That was the first big challenge of ours. How do you make this system land 99.99% of the time? Because you have to send someone to these remote places. That cost is already quite cost prohibitive and defeats the purpose. So we spent a lot of time on this, and we built something using camera systems, we built something using infrared, we built something using ultra-wideband technology, and at the end, it was a mix of everything that allowed us to do this. And the first demo that we did to show the resilience of this thing, we won another project to put the landing technologies onto moving vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and things like tanks and surface vessels. And the idea was that you could convert every mobile asset into quote-unquote an aircraft carrier, give that an aircraft carrier capability. And that was the sort of the big picture dream. And we did a demo, and then we didn't do anything more like that. We thought, okay, that was really cool, But that's so difficult. The static stuff is way easier, and there's a commercial market available for that. So we focused on this more than anything else. The other thing was that we didn't want to do drones. Everybody was building drones. Like I said, everyone was doing either the drone platforms or the analytics, the data platforms. And because so many people building drones, you have DJI, you have Parrot, these big companies already have billion-dollar valuations. I don't really feel like doing more of that. So we decided that our system needed to be modular. We could take any drone off the shelf, we could put it into this box, could program it, get some very clever people to program it in an appropriate way, and then fly it. So we built modular software, a modular architecture that allows you to do this quite quickly. And turnaround time now for new integrations is usually quite short. It's about a month for a whole new model once the documentation is there. It's weather resistance, so this is obviously less challenging for us, but increasingly that is becoming a focal point. For example, offshore wind turbines that need inspection work. That's offshore environment is something that we struggle with sometimes. We have systems, for example, on the southern coast for border monitoring, search and rescue, and nuclear power plants down there. And you can see quite quickly after 2 weeks, you're going to start picking up whether or not things are corroding. And whether or not there's going to be issues on the product itself. So this is an area where we're building around, but almost everything today is focused around those two on the left. So remote operations. We run drone services for police emergency services in Southeast Asia from our offices in Cranfield. We do this also for security teams in France. We have done this in the U.S. We have new contracts for energy companies over in the U.S. where we will be doing the exact same thing. So it's a very, it's got momentum behind it. Remote operations seem to be the thing to do, to focus on at the moment in order to do the second one, the top one, which is continuous drone operations. We want to provide an ability to fly drones throughout the day, all the time. Today, a drone service provider will cost, I guess, if you get a professional one and not your neighbor, they will cost around $600 minimum per day for the drone service. And this goes up. If you have a high-spec drones, they can go up to 3,000 pounds. We have one of our customers, Baffled Beatty, they pay something insane for flying up and capturing data. And we want to provide this capability, but much, much cheaper, leveraging automation to deliver this. So I've just rambled on a little bit. So this is just an example of a customer. So Magnox, we're on an NDA site, a nuclear decommissioning site, and it's doing things like infrastructure inspections. So these sites, they're being brought down all the time. They need to decommission them. These sites were built in like the 50s and 60s, and the blueprint for them has not disappeared, but it's not great, right? The documentation behind how you take these things down, they didn't think about creating these plans. They only made the plans to put them up. So they have to actually do these things very, very carefully, and they don't get a whole lot of funding to maintain. So after storms, you have to go and do comprehensive inspections of the whole site. You have to take pictures everywhere of the whole site, come back, assess the data, and then send out inspection teams or maintenance teams. And this is a massive thing. Magnox, for example, they manage 12 nuclear power plants. I think it's 12, maybe 14 nuclear power plants all across the country. All of them have the same challenges. And nobody wants to send a drone team that is centralized in the south to go and deal with all of these sites, right? So this automated drone station, that's where the need came from a nuclear power plant side of things. This upcoming example is for example, National Grid. So this is one of our last-gen systems being deployed on the grid, and the idea is that does the same thing, really. Goes up, captures data, comes back, lands, and uploads, and it removes the need for people to be on site. Right now, they do this with drones increasingly, but it's helicopters a lot of the time. So that's HeroTech 8 Phase 1. Now we have 3 phases, so if I'm boring you, just yell at me and hurry up. But we're kind of locked today in Stage 2. Stage 2 is really interesting, and it's where we begin to feel this is going to be disruptive. We have an on-demand service called Open Air. So if you imagine, we're taking a step back from selling our systems or renting our systems to the customer. We're taking a step back. Now we are going to keep those systems, and we are going to distribute them across the cityscape. So something like Bristol is where we have the service live at the moment. Somewhere like Milton Keynes, somewhere like Cranfield, which is where we're based, is where we piloted it. But you think big, you think London. You think Bristol, you think Edinburgh. These kinds of cities where there's a lot of potential demand for an on-demand service. So what this allows you to do, this service, is you go onto your phone when you want. Let's say you own your building or you're managing your building. You want to understand after a storm whether or not there's damage in your building, but you don't want to buy a box and you don't want to go out to a £600 per day per flight, even drone service provider. You want it now. You go onto our app. You go onto our website, openair.herotech8.com, and you click, I want this building inspected tomorrow. And then you go and have a coffee. Tomorrow, the data is there for you, right? The nearest drone station in that network has gone up, captured that data, come back, uploaded that data, and off you go. It's there in your inbox waiting for you. This on-demand nature is what we think is particularly disruptive. It costs £150 typically for that data, right? You don't have to pay, you don't have to worry about the insurance, you don't have to worry about regulations. That's managed entirely in the back end by a drone operations team crew to make sure everything is safe. What we're very, very interested in finding out is the use cases. Most of our use cases are things like building inspection. That video that you kind of saw, didn't really see, showed, for example, one of the university customers that we have in Bristol simply requesting. Right now, there's hundreds of flight requests that a very small team have to deal with all the time. And it's everything from facade monitoring, cladding inspections. Very recently, they put up cladding, had a lot of water come in, didn't know what it was, and by chance, one of our flights picked up this massive gap beneath a window, and water kept on going in and causing damage, rot, and everything. And thankfully, that building was still under warranty. I didn't realize buildings obviously they come under warranty, so that's something you think about. And it was still under warranty, so the engineering company is coming back to go and resolve those issues. So already paying for itself as a service. And the data that we are getting is becoming unmanageable. We're getting too much of it. What is very interesting is that when we capture this data, we put it into our data platform. I'll just skip 2 slides so you can kind of take a look at what this looks like. I'll find that later. But what we can do is we can piece together all the imagery into orthomosaics, 3D models. And we can do things like close-up inspections and so on. And the idea is that that customer can see all of their data very, 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 very quickly within that scope of time. It's a day before you get that data. In the future, it will be the next hour I'll have that data. This is kind of what a use case looks like across Bristol city center. So we have a couple of drone stations there, and 1 hour you'll have a construction survey call out. Another hour you'll have a cell tower inspection job. Another one to monitor progress on another construction site, road monitoring, traffic monitoring, railway inspections. These are all real use cases that our systems are doing over there. It's sometimes tricky because we have bottlenecks around regulations. We have bottlenecks around, sometimes people are quite nervous about drone services in city centers because of the privacy concern. So those are 2 areas that we're beginning to learn how to deal with. But the regulation side, we're on a very strong footing. It's probably the biggest bottleneck of the industry, but I think we're on the bleeding edge here.
So quick question on that. Do you need a sort of safety use case included for geographical area, or is it per flight? You need to...
No, so safety case, basically what you have to do is, there are 3 categories of drone operations. There's something called the open category, where you effectively you can fly without any sort of need for permissions. Then you have something below, which is called specific category. The specific category is, for example, if you're flying an aircraft above, let's say 2 kilos, I think it is, exactly, 2 kilos, and you are flying it within, sort of beyond visual line of sight. You are flying it in an interesting way like us over the internet. All of these kinds of things, if you are going beyond what is allowed in the open category, which is effectively someone flying remotely, in the field doing this with their hands, that's kind of specific. Then you have certified, and certified is typically above 25 kilos. Lots and lots of challenges to get your system certified for use. And we sit at the very low end of the specific category. So in our case, we run our operations in an open category for the most part in these cities. We also run beyond visual line of sight in some geographies. The reason why they're different is that the environments are very different. If you guys have been to Cranfield, there's not a whole lot there. It's an airport, and we can deconflict with the airport. That's quite straightforward. There aren't many ground risks. The hardest thing for us, because we fly so close to the ground, is the risk to other ground users. And as a result, we have to make sure that the risk that we, the risk of damaging people or property on the ground is minimum. That's what we have to demonstrate, and that's what we do with the regulators all the time. But we don't do it on a flight-by-flight basis. That'd be nuts. It'd be unusable. It'd take 3 months for the CA to get back and say the flight that they wanted 3 months ago is okay. So we don't do that.
Do you have any issues about security, about where you're flying and who owns the information that?
Oh yeah. So around the data.
Large banks or.
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. So it's not so much the security. We know where we are not allowed to fly.
Right.
So, for example, we get permissions from BAE Systems if we want to go and fly above their stuff or over their stuff. We seek permissions from them before, and if they say no, well, that's the end of the discussion. You have to go the other way. The challenge is more privacy. With the context of GDPR, making sure that the data that we have and the data that is commercial doesn't have unique identifiers that can be traced back to people or businesses, these kinds of things. This is quite difficult. So we work with other partners of ours in order to do this. Look at, for example, Google Maps. If you go into the Street View, everything is anonymized. So we're looking at technology like this. We work with another very close partner of ours, BT, to do exactly this. So there's a lot of, this is probably one of the next big bottlenecks that we will have to reconcile with after. So that would be, I think, the biggest challenge. In terms of security, we're already deployed on critical infrastructure, so munition sites, army bases, naval bases. Police use our systems already. So in terms of security, we had to get through the vetting, which was tough, but there's a blueprint to go and do this stuff. So as long as you can show that your tech is sort of that level, then it's typically okay. And if it's good enough for, let's say, CPNI, it's good enough for us, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yes, I suppose it was really who has access to that information once you've got it, so someone else wants to use it for some nefarious means.
So I think in terms of, so by nefarious means, do you mean I want to snoop on my neighbor, or do you mean I want to plan an attack?
Either, I suppose,
okay.
On the scale.
Got it. That's also a very good question. One that we had to start with, because but snooping on people was actually the first thing we thought about, is how do I make sure person A doesn't request a flight around, person B's house. So we limited it to businesses. So businesses, they have to sign an acknowledgement, like the building that they are going to we're providing an inspection over is owned by and controlled by you. And if it is not, what are you doing? So that's kind of what we've worked up. We don't have a real means of validating, though. So if you were a small company and you really just wanted to do some corporate spying on someone else, this is difficult to manage, and the only thing that we have is an acknowledgement form, something to absolutely develop around. I should say the open air is a closed beta, so we don't have everyone and anyone signing up. What we're trying to do is find out who are the good customers to work with that can go and push this, and not who are the weird rogue ones. So I guess, sorry. This is open air really as a whole. We are mostly in Bristol. We just launched Ipswich, which is where I'm coming in from. And there in Ipswich, we've installed it on an anchor customer's land. So that's the big port. The port sends out requests for everything, for berth monitoring, for security, for warehouse monitoring, looking at ships, counting buoys, checking your lights. Checking your lights is a new use case, but everything really. The use cases are endless, and they pay a very small amount per flight, but they're required to pay on a monthly basis. The challenging or the exciting part is getting all of the stakeholders around to use it. So if you look at this map, right, it's not just the construction company that's being used all across here. It's construction companies using it for construction purposes. BT could be using it for cell tower inspections. Other customers can use it. It's a very on-demand nature. We call it, stupidly, Uber for drones internally. So that's the kind of idea behind it. Now the data, so this is a little picture of our analytics platform. I think there's a video in here, but it's probably not going to work. Oh, that's here, you can see it. So from all the data that we capture, this is a small morsel. I think it changes into a new video where you can see the whole city in 3D. So basically, we take all the pictures, we stitch them together, and we create 3D models of the environment. And this has actually been a really interesting way to work. What we do is generate 3D models. If you just, let's say, black box that for a moment. The idea is that now that we're capturing so much data around us, we can generate a 3D world, a 3D picture of the world around us. And when open air reaches a point where you have a critical volume of flying, it means that the drone will fly. Let's say Costain, the construction company, want a survey. And I know that Costain want that. So, and in between me and Costain, there is let's say a network rail track. I can plan my flights to go and check, because I know Network Rail next month will request this massive data set of the track. So I'll pre-plan to fly and survey this before I go to that construction yard. Come back and upload the data. That was the starting point around this idea. But what actually happens is, if we're capturing all the time, not just when we get to the asset, but all the time, what you get is an enormous amount of data, not just where you want to be, but also in that transition piece. And you collect this every day, all the time, you actually get a phenomenal amount of real-time information, nearly real-time information. So imagine this. This is kind of like a more detailed version of 3D Google Maps. But if you're flying across a city and you're collecting all of this data, you actually have a live Google Maps, right? That's 1 centimeter per pixel. Google Maps about 0.5 meter to 1 meter per pixel. This is 1 centimeter per pixel. And I actually don't know where this video is going anymore. But it's 1 centimeter per pixel, and it's refreshed every time the drone flies. It is the only way. Satellites don't give you this resolution, and even when they become better, they won't give you that frequency. So drones, it seems, is the only way to do it. I have a buddy in California who studied with me in Berkeley. He did something similar. He did something at ground level. Basically, he used bus cameras to learn about the world. So just take a lot of pictures, create 3D models and create very accurate maps, but ground maps. And it occurred to us that as we were developing this service, that we could do this from the air. And the air is what you want to create these extremely high levels of granularity. Is that a word? High levels of detail maps in which we can use. And we've learned that there's so many uses for this, even internally. So now, before we fly, we simulate how we fly. So the day before, imagine tomorrow there's 100 flight jobs that I need to go and deliver. Now we take those jobs. We've built a 3D model of the world around us, the most recent one. In our simulation, we take this model, we put it into a gaming engine. We do this today. There's about 4 guys just sort of, it's very silly. They're playing video games. They're flying. They're doing the flights in a gaming engine to plan our mission around these buildings. And we capture that data, give it to the customer, and we work in this way. This platform is called RSR, Real to Sim to Real. So we're using this ability to leverage the drone data acquisition technology, bring it back into software to make a synthetic environment, and then fly according to the synthetic environment's output to deliver extremely high accuracy flights that we can reconcile with safety, because we know, one of the interesting things is when you fly in the synthetic world, you can kind of see behind you, right? You know what is behind you because it's just a simulation. So you can take your camera and you can look behind you. And actually, when you fly for real, you're flying, let's say I'm flying very close to the building, but from the camera, it's very difficult to estimate how far away I am and whether or not there's something behind me. So I can look behind me, I can project what is actually behind me as I'm flying. And this is very similar to some of the latest cars will have a 360 view. You will see what is on your left, on your right, and behind you. It's kind of this, except you can see everything. So we deem this as one of the biggest step changes in the way in which we conduct risk assessments and our safety checks in our operations. Sorry, you had a question before I rambled on.
Just on the point about the real simulation to real. So does that mean, correct me if I misunderstood, but does that mean that once you have that simulation, are you actually be able to automate or semi-automate the actual flying of that train, or is it still all manual?
So it's manual the first time you do it. because we have a PhD student whose job is to look at how to do this. So I can't tell you how to do it or how we are doing it, but it's another. We have a agreement with Cranfield every year. We take a PhD student or two, but I think the idea is that currently we will manually fly it the first time, and then once it's saved, we can optimize it a little bit, and then we run it for real. And it's a repeat mission. So the next time someone requests this, it should be just a click and go. And you'll click, drone goes up synthetically, fly around. We check whether or not that operation is okay. Increasingly, what we are building into the synthetic world is this concept of a risk engine. So it's a calculator that tells you how dangerous is your flight. So for example, is your drone in this gaming engine hitting anything? Or we project where the positions of the satellites are, the GPS, GNSS satellites are, and then we see how many satellites do we have line of sight with at that moment in time that we're projecting, and then do we need to, there's something called a PDOP, which is a quality of your accuracy, your projected accuracy, and if the accuracy is too high, it's too low, we don't fly. Things like communication risk. Are we expecting to lose communications because there's no BT coverage? We have that partnership with BT, they give us SIM cards. And it's like, can we fly in this area? And if we can't, we don't again. Again, it's too high risk to fly. So we take a lot of the outputs from the simulation tool to feed that planning system. So if you're basically making in this environment, you're making a list of constraints. So if you picture it, it's like no-fly zones are created because risks are too high. And then there's lots of flight areas because that's where you get quality data from. So it's the amalgamation of both of those that create an ability to fly effectively and safely. That's what we were gunning for. Yeah? Well, that's my talk, guys. I didn't actually have a lot on the slides, but there's some other videos. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
While on that, you got very close to talking about this, and I want to push you to talk a bit more. You're capturing a lot of data.
Yeah.
And how are you managing and storing and indexing? And
got it. So damn question.
I guess that was the answer.
So
you must have something.
So there's So it's not cheap. So we have something called we have a data lake. So there's other databases, data lakes. They're two separate things. Are you guys familiar with it, or do I need to? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So a data lake is basically, it's not unorganized data. It is kind of, but it's kind of data that we pick up. We pick it up raw. We reference it and index it, kind of again, but it all gets put in an unorganized way into this data storage tool. And the idea that we have, in order to address the data problem that we're reaching. So, for example, the first prototype actually came out very recently. But the idea was, if I had a map, let's see if I can. I'll just pick this crap map that I put together. So imagine this map. I'm the city council, and I want to understand. I want a picture from all this data that I'm getting, that I continue to get. I want a picture, a live picture-ish of this area. I draw a list. I circle those set of buildings over there, and I want a picture of this every Monday between 2021 and 2023. Through the data lake, we basically can go through all the referencing, and then we can produce that. And then I can produce a snapshot picture of what that environment looked like each time, right? It's that 1 centimeter per pixel view, but then sort of presented in a storyboard of this is how your world is changing every Monday. So we use a data lake to basically reference it. And there's a lot of difficult challenges in this. It takes a hell of a long time just to find all of the pictures in the data lake structure. It's something that we're learning more and more about. But it's something, for example, where we look for research opportunities with universities in order to sort of dive into the detail. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, very much so.
Okay. Great. Any more questions? Awesome. Okay. Well, hopefully.
You had a slide which said infrared.
Ah, damn it. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I don't mean to do it. I go to something and then my brain has ADHD. I forget. So actually, this is part of a survey activity that we did. We did a survey campaign of thermal data. So the ask was across one particular area in, I think it's crystal again. One particular area, we basically were asked for a large chunk of it to look at the thermal data sets to see where there was, for example, leakage, thermal leakage from buildings. Actually, you can get so much information from thermal, and we're learning more and more about it. That's why we've hired specific, thermal surveyors. I think that's what they're, thermal surveys who can understand what is happening on these buildings. And what you do is basically during the day, you take a snapshot picture of a rooftop, and then at nighttime, usually at nighttime, you take another picture but with a thermal camera, and it will tell you. You can take a look. It needs to be nighttime because solar radiation will basically heat up the building and hide things in a way that night or as cool a data set as you can get won't give you. So the idea is that you can look at this building. It kind of looks okay. And when you take a thermal shot of this, it gives you a lot of meaningful output about where there is poor insulation. And that is what we've been doing here. Except we do this over hundreds and hundreds of buildings. The idea is basically that you can build up a thermal map. There are some excellent thermal maps of large areas where you can estimate, for example, money that's just been lost, a lot of waste. And you can do things like predictive maintenance. So if you took a look at this picture and you understood where there are issues popping up throughout the year, only through this live view of your city again, you can then put in predictive maintenance programs to go and say, look, you're losing a lot of heat here. You'll probably, if you want to bring your bills down, you can go and fix this, and we can do it for you. Not we, whoever's looking at the data. And this is what we're kind of looking at. We have a big campaign in about a month to go and redo the same sort of big estate, just to understand which buildings are losing heat. And the idea is that if you had a full-time system, you could do this very, very frequently to understand your maintenance challenges moving forward. So that was the thermal picture. It's very meaningful. Thermal data is also probably most expensive to sell, not to necessarily capture, but it is actually, with automation, this is a very low-cost endeavor, so we can bring the cost of doing this down quite significantly. Yeah? I'll just flip through in case I had some good nuggets over here. It's massive slides. How am I doing on time?
We're close to 7, but if you feel there's still a wave of interest, then keep going.
I don't know. I'll go. I can keep going.
Manuel will come up with some good questions, which
Nice.
will take half an hour. So
Got it.
keep going through a little bit.
So this is a little bit of our open air platform. Basically, it's a asset catalog. So customers come in. Let's say I am Milton Keynes University, and my campus now. I basically draw up all of the assets that I want. Fill this, and then you can go use it. You can request a flight basically within the hour to go and do those inspections, and that gets into a control room. It's a bit more about Risk Engine. This is a little bit interesting. So this is our 3 generation of the world. So this is what we're looking at from sim to real. And the idea is that within the simulation world, you would then be able to click go, or draw my mission, click go, and then you can see that fly for real. And then there's actually an excellent side-by-side comparison of what the camera sees. You can see on the bottom right. This is what the camera would see, and then what you see for real. I think there's an example of this later down this video. But we do this now. It's basically part of our continuous operations, our continuous progress. Continuous running of our service. It's now always this. And what is interesting, this is actually right at the beginning. This is when we first started to do it. The more we fly around the structures, the more accurate they become, the more revised they become, and you have a better and better textured model of the world. You can see a lot of warping, you can see some triangulations that are quite clear and not continuous. But as you build the service up and up, like you understand where you need to go capture more imagery from to fill the gaps that may have been left from our photogrammetry engine.
Are you taking videos and then taking the frames from the videos? Or are you taking individual pictures at intervals?
No, so there's a couple of things we do. So for videos, while the video is running, we receive telemetry information. And you can see, as the video is playing, where the drone is flying and what it's looking at. So this is number one. In general, the flights are actually high-resolution imagery. So it depends on which drone we're using. But for example, this one, I think it's probably a 24-megapixel snapshots that are happening every second. And you piece all those pictures together to create your survey information and your orthomosaics.
So how long can the drone stay in the air?
Again, depends on which drone you're using. The most popular ones that we have are about 30 minutes in the air. That's about as much time as you have. Some of the other ones that we have, 45 minutes. The ones for defense, for some reason they're just a lot worse. It's like 20, 25 minutes, about the maximum they fly for, because we use small ones, not the big stuff. But I would say 30 minutes, 35 minutes is probably on average. Yeah.
So how long will it take to scan a building?
So there are a couple of options that you have. I'm never giving you good answers like, 30 minutes. But it does depend. It depends a little bit. For example, if you want a detailed inspection, it will take a lot longer because you need to fly a lot closer, you need to fly along, you need to capture the surface at different angles. But that's what the customer is asking for. So a building will usually take one flight if it's just a roof inspection. But if it's elevation, so you're looking at all the floors, for example, it depends on how tall the building is. You have to go around each time. Big mapping missions as well. They can take quite a long time. But in general, I'd say we're increasingly trying to map. As we fly to do a roof inspection, we will map the world around us, and then we will fuse this data with data that we captured previously again, or what is captured later on, to build that grid view, that mapping view. I don't know if I made sense there. So there's lots of tools, but these are some of ours. So this is a lot of the flights at Bristol, something like 15,000 pictures. That's insane. But this is how you look at all the stuff, right? You click on a picture, and then it will show you what that picture is. So these are the kinds of tools that we use. We give these tools to the customer to use in order to go through their data. What we found is that as we develop very quickly, increasingly there's fewer options of tools that we can give customers. So we have to build them a lot ourselves, which is never great as a startup. But that's kind of it. So that's kind of me. Hopefully that was useful and interesting.
Very good.
Well, I'm going to say thank you.